This is not the best here thing. Right. Hello.
Morning.
Oh, yes. Morning.
But I just sent you a note back. The university for Sloan needs to show we stayed in the rooms as opposed to book a room. So do you have the receipts?
I don't know. It seemed, I will check with Emily again. She's been helpful with that side of things. Yeah, that's what she sent me. I'll see.
Yeah, so when I was checking out of that hotel in Poland, I made them give me like you stayed in the hotel and you have zero, you owe us zero amount of money and you spent this much. And then I can turn that in. I turned that in and I was able to get reimbursed. So, and then the same for the for the flights, what I had to show was that here's what I booked and here's how much it cost me. The nice thing is I don't have to show my boarding passes.
Hang on. So the Wizz Air documentation was not enough?
No, that's fine. I think that's fine. And what I'm saying is the
Oh,
hotel. The difference between a hotel and the airline is we don't have to show the boarding passes. We just show that we paid this much money. But the hotel is totally different. We have to show that we stayed in the hotel.
okay. I will see what I can find. I will see. So, yeah, Fabienne, how's your ESTA coming along?
It's not yet requested. I can't request it yet. So when I have an update, I'll tell you.
Oh, okay. Is it a passport thing or?
It's funny because you keep on asking when I said I'll let you know. So I'll reply and I'll tell you a little bit of life story. So I had the passport for
Sorry, I don't mean to be pushy. I'm just interested. I'm sorry.
but it's okay. It's not a problem. It's nothing like top secret. I feel a little bit ashamed. That's all. So that's why I didn't want to say it. But I had a passport for my whole life, always valid. And last month I renewed the one for the little one. She's 4. And I knew I was supposed to do both at the same time, but I had other things to do. And then last week when I started to book the flight, like, I know something is off. I'll just double check before I book the flight. And of course, it was not valid for like 3 days or something like this. So it's a bit annoying. That being said, the consulate here in Brussels last time, I got a passport for the little one in like a week or something like this. Not even urgent, just a normal one. So that's not going to be a problem. And I can't expedite it because then if I do, it becomes another whole process. So when the passport come out the ESTA, and I think ESTA is like a matter of 2 or 3 days maximum. Uh,
Okay, I forget because I still think of Europe as one thing, but of course you're not in France at the moment, so it's
no,
not the same. Yeah. Well, in
but
Norway,
again, it's
it's
pretty
bad, but
efficient.
for other reasons. Sorry, sorry.
I was just saying, like every time I've done it here, it's honestly, I'm not necessarily a huge fan of administration, but this has been always extremely fast and efficient, so that's why I'm not worried.
By the way, hang on. I know you have the agenda. I'm going to put a link in here anyway. Bada boom. I came across again the Google Notebook LLM thing. Oh, hello, Mark. I thought you weren't going to be here today, so that's a good surprise. That's a good.
Sorry, it's next week, so I'm off down to Cornwall next week and back next Friday.
Cool. I was just going to say, I tried the Google Notebook LM, And I put all of the Future of Text, all volumes up there as PDF. You know, one of them is 1 million characters. They're big documents. And I've been doing some testing, asking it questions. It's very good. Just now, Mark, I happened to ask it, what is Mark Anderson's perspective on metadata? I don't think you would disagree with much of this. So I'm just wondering, at some point, we should probably look into more of how to use this for spatializing. Anyway, let's go through the agenda. First of all, Dini, I know it's been a while, but for this group, do you have a Stuttgart update?
Oh, it doesn't apply to us anyway. It's just I talked about the Next. It was great. I went there. It was a fast trip. I had just gotten back from Poland, had a few days home, packed up and went to Stuttgart. Scott Retberg and Joe Tabby were there, which was great. I got to see them both, and I talked about the Next and the work we're doing there. I keynoted that event, so that was fun. And then I got back home, was home a few days, and went to Raleigh, North Carolina, and talked about the Next. So it really has nothing to do with us, but lots of travel, and I'm home now for the rest of the year. So I'm just glad I'm catching my breath, getting caught up. By Friday afternoon, I plan to have the symposium wrapped up in terms of the logistics. And I think all we need to do after that is determine the schedule. And Frodo, we want to make sure that we have Vint Cerf that we can interview. Did we line him up for the interview yet?
We did.
Okay, what time is that interview?
That's okay. We have that here, but okay, let me just check. So 1 second. So we have it here. 1 p.m. Pacific for an hour.
Okay, that's gonna be Pacific Standard Time. Okay, 1 hour, 1 to 2. Okay, and then the other thing is I want to mention that the logistics, I've got to get there early on Saturday morning. So I'll probably be there on Friday with Greg getting set up. Hi, Andrew. Because we want to make sure that the system works so we can have people zooming in. So we want to get all that on Friday. So Friday, I'm going to be tied up at the Murdoch building all day, working with just all the tech stuff, right? And then Saturday, I have to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning because we start at what, 9?
So I'll be arriving in Vancouver around 3 o'clock on Friday. So then I should be able to jump up to meet up with you, see whatever you need, check in to wherever I'm staying, and hopefully we can all have a casual dinner together, whoever is available.
I thought when are you going to the SEA, SEH? I thought okay, you're staying through.
Leaving on Tuesday.
Okay.
Do you think I can leave you that quickly? Are you mad, woman? Of course not.
Okay.
Need to have a little bit of time there. Maybe
As I mentioned, that's the Thanksgiving week, and our school is shut down, and I usually take off and visit my family in Texas.
You're seeing Mark on Monday, Tuesday, no?
Monday.
Yeah, Monday. So you'll be around. Maybe we'll have coffee or something later on in the day or something. I don't know. It's a beautiful part of the world anyway. You should not feel a pressing need to host us. We know that you have Mark stuff to do. Mark updated that he had to book his tickets early. So that's all very cool.
Well, Mark's going to spend time with Greg working with Intermedia and me with all this stuff. It's all hypertext stuff. It has nothing to do with Future of Text.
Well, it sounds hyper. But anyway, we're all going to be in the neighborhood. So
Okay.
It should be all right.
Now, are you flying in from California? Is that where you're flying in from?
Yes.
Okay. So when are you hitting?
What's that?
When are you hitting the States? When are you arriving in the States?
Saturday. So I can spend 1 day with my friend Kevin, and I'm hoping that Fabian will be persuaded to spend some time in the Bay Area, but we don't know yet. Today is the day I'm going to be emailing people in the Bay Area to see who to meet, especially pressuring my friends at the fruit company. The one that keeps doctors away, fruit company. avoiding the name for the record.
Okay, so you're not going to be around on Friday to help me at all in the space and to give me directions. You're going to show up on Saturday morning and just kind of walk in and see what it looks like. And hopefully it's what you want.
No, I'm landing at 3 to go directly to the venue.
The venue closes at 5 o'clock on
I
Friday.
I did not know that, but that should give me at least an hour and a half there, no?
Well, if you land at the airport and you go and you get your bags and you get in the car.
Deanie, let's, as you say we should do, let's follow the agenda. You and I can discuss this later. There's also a section for it. If you want me to arrive earlier, I didn't know that. I'm very happy to do that. I didn't expect there to be a lot of setup. It's basically chair, screen, and podium. But yes, I'm very happy to come earlier if that's a preference.
All right, I'm just trying to get it through my head when you're showing up, and I just know that when you look at things, there's a certain way you want stuff, right? I'm going to do the best I can without you, but on Saturday morning it'll be too late to set anything up, right? Because we start at 9 o'clock.
Well, the setup we had for the Future of Text before has always been speaker with a display and people in front. There aren't any real requirements beyond that
I've never been to Future of Text before. That's the problem. I've never attended, so I've only come online.
But now you know, it's it's a simple setup. Am I leaving anything out, Mark, who is a veteran Future of Texter?
No, I don't think there's anything overly complex in the setup. I mean, to be honest, it's more down as much to the essentially what the room allows and the nature of what people want. I will be showing.
Okay, all right, I'll do my best. Thanks. Okay, and that's all about stuff.
So that was Stuttgart, and now just to make it clear in the community, I think we made a decision that when we share data, it will be shared as JSON, so we don't keep going in circles on that. And no specific comments on that, or any specific comments on that? I mean, how we format the JSON is, of course, still something to discuss, Canvas and so on. And then from a while ago, I met with Jonathan Finn, who made the Sibelius music notation software. I met him again this week. Good guy. He's been to a Future of Text. Fabian, you've actually met him briefly. And you, Mark. He is very interested in what we're doing, especially the book itself. He made me change the leading on the export, kind of a detail, but also he's interested in going into XR things now, specifically with music notation. And he's trying to invent simplified music notation, which is a very fascinating discussion, I hope, for us, because music, of course, has to exist on a timeline. And we've talked about timeline so many times, this may be quite fun, just a detail. And then another thing, I think this may only be new to you, Deanie, and that is sparking of what Mark has said about writing for thing, to make it different. One thing that I've been testing that works really well is just writing plain text and then selecting that and running it through an LLM, so that we should maybe introduce the notion of doing that on purpose, like writing commands in the document itself, with the expectation the user won't just read it as text, but will read it through an LLM. Just an interesting aspect of text. And then
what's the need for you haven't explained what the need for the LLM is in this context.
I imagine you might write something like on Thursday the 17th, 20 blah blah blah, the certain situation was this and that, then it's changed to so and so. I wonder what it is now. So when you run that through, can you graph that for me? Or let's say it's a mathematical equation, can you solve it for me? All of these things become possible. It might also be, here's a family. Well, I think it's a long discussion in and of itself. But it's just the expectation that LLMs, for the author, we shouldn't just expect people to do summaries and stuff of our work. We should also be able to write explicit things like, I usually fly on Fridays. I don't know if that's possible anymore. Have the LLM check if there are flights. Just know that you're writing for potentially different. This is all from you, Mark. So I look forward to further discussions of it. And then there is a brief thing that has been driving me insane. and some people may say that I'm insane already,
Mhm.
but I'm going to just, no comment, please. Sorry. Hang on, the system is not on Do Not Disturb. Right, okay, share this really briefly. So this goes to the notion of how we share things on a knowledge space, a knowledge graph, a knowledge shape, whatever, right? So the way that I'm trying to design this is through the interface, because that's how I think. And I write it for my programmers to implement because that makes it real. So the notion is, while you're writing, you do define concepts, and the defined concept becomes what we've been talking about. It becomes the equivalent of the Finder icon and all of that stuff. So the thing is, this is as it is now. At the bottom, we have references that exist now. And that very much addresses the question that Fabienne has asked of, are these things the things themselves or references to it? So in the references here, it can link to a PDF or a 3D model or whatever. Either something local with a known relative address or online. And then you can write your definition. But here's the thing that I'm excited about, because I'm just going to go into author and show. I started mocking up stuff within our world. And this is what it looks like. It's just text. So one of the things I would want to do is have a map on the Future of Text Lab, Future of Text team, book contributors, all these things, right? But what happens if I put the book contributors inside a map that isn't the one you're on, if it's linked to it? Right, that could be cool and it could be useful, but it does mean that if you do something in the map view, and it should link to a book contributor, the book contributor is no longer there, so the line wouldn't appear. So it's hidden. So this is why logically, all the maps should be in the same space. Do we agree on that? Because ideally, these kind of links or subcategories shouldn't be opaque. You should be able to connect through them, right? Mark, yes.
I politely beg to differ in that experience just shows that it sounds reasonable, but in fact it scales badly. So
Yes.
don't want to plan. You want to plan along a thing that won't require you to have everything in one map.
I agree.
Because in doing that, you will avoid. It allows you to plan ahead to avoid the overkill. The point about things not linking, it just occurred to me is why can't they link to? So if you dropped in the sort of picture you showed just now, if you dropped in the book contributors, the other things could link to the book contributors object as a proxy for the book contributors that are effectively contained by the book contributor object, because in a sense they're child objects of that map, and that points to one of the ways which you don't have to have the whole map. I mean, I've just seen this. I've seen this debate go round and round for at least 20 years in one of the sort of tools for thought sort of arenas I've been in, and just putting everything on one map does not end up well.
I'm not saying we should. I agree with what you said on proxies, and I think that's probably what I'm about to show you. So that was interesting. So here's the notion that don't worry about that. If you click on this is A, and you don't choose capability person location, but you choose map, so that's a separate thing at the bottom really screaming out, then this happens. You can link to what that map is. So it's a local document. You can drag it in or paste the name or whatever, right? And that means that you can then, if you wanted to, copy the keywords or the defined concepts from that map into this definition. So that means that when we close this dialog, anything that points to that, the text is in the definition, so it'll make the line. The downside of this is you do it once, and if you change what's in the other map, it won't be accurate. I'm actually okay with that because methods can be put in to automatically put that in later or manually, but it's a very simple way to have different maps, so you don't have to worry about the scaling. But this thing here does act like a MARC proxy. So that means that certain entities on the map link to other maps, but they also contain information about what that map is. Yes, Mark.
Okay, so this sounds, I mean, because I don't know how much prior art you've looked at in this area, but in a way, this seems like the model that goes back to story space maps, because you essentially have objects in this case in your text view, which you could think of like an outline, and they can be containers. So you had your bulleted list, and essentially you were defining some of these as containing maps. I think it helpful to get a slant on that. It's very difficult to understand the thing only viewed through the context of a UI dialogue, because it doesn't really show the structure, and it makes it difficult to see how the bits relate together. But it seems to me that what you're positing is that well, one of the things is which is the canonical part of the document? Is it the text, or are the maps, or are the maps peer objects to the text? That bit's not clear to me.
Can you elaborate? I don't understand the question.
Well, okay, so you made a document, and the document we have at the moment in Author or in Word or something is essentially a long form text. The length is sort of immaterial, but you basically have.
That's irrelevant to this. To answer, I think I can answer your question now.
Okay.
This is about in Author, I use the defined concepts. That's the term that I use. In our language, it's pretty much entities, and I'm realizing it's basically the same thing. So the map is what matters here, not the long form text part of it.
So the map is therefore in a sense a peer object to the text. It's a root level thing. So when you look at the document, it will contain a text and perhaps one or more maps. If I'm understanding correctly.
One map, but one or more defined concepts.
Okay, so within that, therefore, so all the maps are essentially a nested outline. So that, for instance, your book contributors is a container of all the things that are contributors to books.
A map is currently a JSON object that happens to be, which of course you know very well because you've looked at it, which is inside the .liquid document. It has no document structure connection to the normal text stuff at all. So what I'm suggesting is because we need some sort of a model whereby anybody can write entities, nodes, whatever we call it, that has some sort of relationship to others, that can be shared with different systems, and that can link to each other, because you're not going to be able to have one map with everything. As you said, it doesn't scale. And if it's distributed, we lose the whole. So that's why this is a bit of a suggestion for jury rigging, by putting some of the information in the thing that is a link. So it's not just a plain link, it's a link with telling what's behind it.
Well, presumably the link you're going to capture as a GUID. So each object, JSON object, will know the IDs of the things to which it links, because that's how you can do most of the magic most easily.
That's beyond this brief introduction talk here, but that's exactly the kind of thing we need to talk about, because once these things are shared, whether it's to WordPress, XR, or whatever, these linked maps will need some unique way to link to each other. So that's all.
Sure. Okay, I mean, the thing that I'm just trying to sort of bear down on a bit is just to understand. So it sounds as though we're creating a completely new standard here. So this doesn't sound like any document structure I've seen before, which is fine. But that's the whole point of asking the question, because if it's new, then we have to think not only about its structure, but how then it maps to other types of document structure that pre-exist outside, because obviously there won't be a straight match.
So the thinking here is, I don't know. I've been looking into what structures are openly available. When you look for knowledge graphs and stuff, there's never any actual technical stuff available that at least I have seen. So it's an approach. Also on Monday, we will have Chris Gebhardt for the first hour starting to talk about distributed systems. And then I've invited, haven't heard back, Jack Park, who is very much a knowledge graph person, to come in and give us his perspective, so that we do use prior art. But all I wanted to do was to bring up to you guys here the notion of a link that says something about where it's going. The most unrevolutionary idea in hypertext, but to use it for maps rather than just links. Before we go on, any specific comments from Andrew and Fabian from a technical perspective? Are you going to throw things at the screen, or are you okay with this direction, or what? I thought you were muted and you were going to say something, but you all shook your head. That's fine. Okay. Any other announcements? Fine. Then it is Dini and me. Oh yeah, link basis comes into it now. Of course it does. There's nothing wrong with having essentially a document that is a link base for a set of relationships. So we can start doing all kinds of good things. Right. So Dini, what more do we have to talk about except the symposium and book? We from a spreadsheet, just to mention, we have 28 agreed to come to the actual symposium, 45 agreed to write an article. Some write more than one, which is fine. That's the rough numbers we have now. We've started getting in touch with the students, Dini and me. We got some responses there, which is good. Yeah, we're going through the next bit. Also,
Can I share the document? Can I share that document with everybody about the updates? That would be very useful. I've got it
that's
sitting
fine.
right here on the desktop.
Yeah.
That be okay?
Yeah. What document is that? But yes, but which one? Do
The
you
one
mean
the one we've been talking.
the spreadsheet?
This one, not the spreadsheet. It's the update.
Oh, that one.
This
All
is everything about this is everything I'm doing, and I just wanted to like let you know where we are and what we're up to. So if you open up that doc, I went through the grant and pulled out everything that we had to do because I'm writing the report right now, and I have to make sure we do all these things. You can see that I've been pricing out the food. We've got $3,500 to work with. And so I'll have all the food hopefully tied up by Friday evening. And then I'm looking for maybe some donations, some sponsors. I'm going to go to my university and ask them for some sponsorship. But anyway, so there's the food. And so I'm finalizing that. I did hire a young man named Rylan Eisenhower. He's going to be our social media / videographer. And I got him on board this week. He's now finalized as of today, and he's meeting Frode at 10:30 this morning by Zoom to talk about, Frode's vision and what Frode wants. And then I'm going to work with Rylan to set up a calendar that will post on various social media channels that will promote the book and the conference. Note that we only have 60 seats in that room. We probably have 40 people coming already. So we don't want to publish this too much because we can't accommodate everybody. So I want to make sure that we don't get too crowded in that room, or the fire marshal will close us down, which happens here in the Pacific Northwest a lot. Fire is a big deal here. The symposium, we've got $500 set aside for that, and so Rylan's gonna be the person doing that work on the symposium day so that Frode doesn't have to do it. Frode is excellent at documenting conferences. At the last conference for the Hypertext conference, I mean, he was all over the place, kind of running the show, taking pictures, and really doing a great job documenting that event. But that's not what he needs to be doing at this conference. So Rylan is going to be setting up a camera. We've got all the equipment here, and he'll be in charge of that. Okay. And we're paying him $500 for that editing work for that project. We've got $1,500 for the book, and Frode can spend that any way he wants. And so we're going to pay Mark Anderson out of these funds because he's going to do all that kind of editorial work. That's how we're paying Mark to come to the conference. And as I mentioned, Rylan's going to be doing the social media. We have $1,500 for that. And we promised Sloan LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and then some posts to Blue Sky, Threads, and Mastodon. Probably not too heavy because they're not busy social media sites. And I'm guessing that Frode and you and I will repost to Twitter, although A lot of our folks aren't on Twitter anymore. Student competition, there's no funds associated with it. That paperwork will go out this week after FOTA approves what I do tomorrow, and Ryland will get that out. So we'll start getting some stuff for the student competition. Just to remind everybody, we promised Sloan a diverse competition. And that meant that if somebody didn't know much about how to make something technically, they can write about it. They can post a sketch. There's all kinds of ways they can participate. They can make an animation, a video. So it's all listed here in the formats that we're going to take it. And so I'm drawing up that call for entries, and we'll get that out hopefully at the end of this week. The graduate student travel plans, we promised Sloan 2 travel grants for $500 each. I made a document that someone would fill out and submit to Froda and me, and we've already gotten one. Looks like we'll get a few more. And Froda put this on the website. Yes, Froda. And then we have usability testing. We told Sloan we paid $100 per person with usability testing. That wasn't practical. That has not been a practical thing. And so we're paying Mark for some of this, out of some of this money, and we'll have $2,000 left for usability testing. And if we need to do that at the end of the semester before we close up shop for year one, we can bring in some other folks to do that work. Know that we also have some money left over for the technical, and Froda and I talked about it, and we want to throw that into the work that Andrew is doing. So more of the production, because we actually are spending more money on production than we thought we were. We front-ended the production by paying Andrew 27 hours a week. And then we're going to kind of loosen up at the end of the semester. We haven't loosened up. He's still putting in that many hours. So we're going to move that $6,000 so that we will not be in the hole for Andrew's salary. Does that make sense to everybody? That's all logistical stuff that maybe doesn't interest you, but that's the kind of stuff that has to be done on the back end. And since you're part of the Future Text Lab, your names are all over the LeGrant, and Fabienne, you're now part of the production team. I want you to be aware of the finances and how we're planning these changes. I'm working on the report to do November 1st. I need to get money spent as fast as possible, so I will be getting a lot of these things moved, if not this week, then next. And that's my report.
Thank you, Deanie. I just want to emphasize the Andrew side of things. That bit of money was supposed to be for an XR specialist. And lo and behold, you are now an XR specialist. So I'm very comfortable with putting that money where your mouth is. Plus, to say it on the record, you are woefully underpaid for your skill sets. Something we hope to rectify in the future, but for now, this is all we can do. So that's good. Yeah, so Deanie and I will continue offline to talk about some of these things. It's all very exciting. And Andrew, how are the references coming along?
References, oh my voice. The references are coming along really well. In fact, I thought I might have something to show off today. And then last night I had like an hour left and I was like, I know, I'll add a feature. And I broke everything. So
you're doing my way of development.
next week. But that means that next week, most likely, I'll have all of the asks done for the reference stuff. So the whole thing will just like work together in the system. I know it might be a little frustrating from your side not getting progress updates like I normally do. It was just how it worked out this time. Too many interconnected pieces, and either it all works or none of it does.
I have no problems with that, Andrew. If we didn't trust you, and you're some weirdo, yes, but we trust you and we're very grateful for your effort. So if there's nothing to show, there's nothing to show. There's nothing wrong with that. I am hoping, though, that we can start experimenting with putting our book into what you already have in the same manner we did the proceedings for our ACM hypertext. And I'm wondering, the reason I started talking about these things in the beginning of the talk today, define concept entities, what have you, it would be very interesting to see if we can start not doing it for real now, but pretending. So we have our quote unquote library layer where we may have things floating about. It could be an interesting thing to start with not necessarily really code properly. If you have something, we try it. It may set us up really well for authoring next year. Because one thing I've noticed every time I work on our document for our future and I go into scenarios, the best scenario really is authoring articles for our book because it's real. And then we start looking at the dimensions of stuff we can have. So one thing I mentioned at the very beginning of the talk was before everybody had a chance to log in, let me just find it here. I've been playing around with the Google Notebook LM. I put all of our books in there and I can actually ask it questions now. And it's quite useful. Anyone have a question I should ask as a quick test? Come on.
How many pages are you going to be? How many pages are you? How many chapters do you have? How many articles on XR are there?
Okay.
How many women are in this book? I can keep going. Shut me up.
Okay, boom. I did.
What sources are cited by the greatest number of people in the collections?
It is impossible to determine the exact number of women featured in these books. What sources mentions numerous individuals that inconsistently specify their genders. For example, 1, 2, 3, 4 list contributors, blah, blah, blah. But yeah. Some names like Lee Nash, Lesia Trass suggest they're women. However, many other names do not provide clear indication. So that's fair enough, I guess. Anyone have any other questions? I asked it, what is Mark Anderson's perspective on metadata? And it gave a lot. I think you would agree with most of it. But you have a question, maybe something else, someone else?
Well, do you want to post the answer because we can't see that? Why don't you post that in the chat?
Because it's very long.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, put a bit of it. No. I sorry. I mean, I'm not making that comment in a sort of in any way disparaging way.
No.
But obviously, until it's hard to know what looks good. To say, thanks. I see something.
No, it's an eminently okay thing to say. Hang on. So there's something about underpants and gnomes in here, Mark.
That sounds right. Yep, that's Southpark. Underpants Gnomes business theory, as taught by good business schools around the world as well.
We do need to figure out a way to build this kind of amazingness into our visualizations, don't we? Fabienne, you're a clever and critical person. Try to think of a question I should ask it. Sorry, I see. While you think of that, Peter, please go ahead.
Yeah, ask it what sources have had the most influence on the entire community of authors.
Okay, you could have written that. Okay, I will do it now. Just giving you a hard time. What sources have had the largest influence? Influence on, how did you word it?
Influence on the community of authors.
Okay. Quickly reading 4 massive books. And Doug Ted, The Constitution, Federalist Papers, Fan Fiction, Transformers, books like The Babel and Confucius. Damn. I'll have to split that up. How impressive is that?
So since you asked the critical perspective, I just watched a video earlier on the Apple paper on AI and LLMs, and they were basically saying those things don't reason. They do realistic sounding sentences. So that's kind of my take also on it. So as long as we transform one piece of text to another and the reader can easily confirm that it's the output is useful, I'm all for this kind of queries. If there is any notion of veracity or truth or provenance, it makes me uneasy. So
Okay,
asking the question.
to address that, um, yes, AI stuff needs to be, whether it's a tool or a reply or a generation, needs to be acknowledged as being such. But my experience in the last few months in doing Claude for our own record, in the beginning it was a bit hokey, there were some issues. It's absolutely amazing, especially the agreements and disagreements we have every week. It captures real nuance, and I really don't feel that most people would be doing more quote unquote reasoning. I mean, logic. Look, of course you're right, Fabian. These things do not use logic. You know, you ask it a logic puzzle, very often it'll get it wrong. Very other things it'll get wrong. But logic in itself is what gave us the Vietnam War, right? That was over logical. It wasn't emotional. There wasn't ethics. It was like, if we bomb this people here, they will move there. That's part of the history. So logic has its uses, but most people don't think about logic. What should I have for lunch? You know, we don't go through a logic reasoning tree on something like that either, right? So I really think of this more from an artistic perspective, like a painter or a sculptor. You know, you can have a beautiful rendition of something with rough edges. Here there are rough edges. And of course, Fabian, to emphasize, I agree with you. If you're talking about something important, then you really need to go through and check every part of it. But I think a lot of work can work like this. But I mean, okay. Just as an example, I'm going to paste in the last one here. Hang on. I asked it. Oh, there's not a lot of space in.
I'd be interested to know what it thinks the future of text is.
Oh, okay. I can. Why don't I've asked several LLMs that. Let me ask, based on these articles, what do you think the future of text is? But please have a look at the last few I pasted. That is individuals and sources referencing Doug. That's a useful thing to know. What kind of people had a certain origin, right? Like this Alain Chauffeur, I have no idea who that is, can't remember. So that's useful. Okay, based on these articles, what do you think the future of text is? Click,
So
click.
I'll just insist a little bit.
Sure.
Because you ask, it's because it's very different that you, again, who's been participating to those discussions, or you who know what the future of text is, ask and get a proper answer, versus, let's say, my better half or random stranger who does, and they actually don't know. So they have no way of verifying. So you can say if it's wrong or not. Otherwise, for somebody who doesn't actually know, and it's not just a fun game for them, like they actually have to know because either they're curious or they have a paper to write or anything. It's like, to use an analogy, it's like walking on logs on a river. Yeah, you can do it, but it's scary, and I don't think that's so. When you do tests like this, it's not at all the same as somebody who doesn't know in advance or who doesn't have the context and all this. So I'm not saying the examples you give are not correct and they're not impressive. But if I take the perspective of somebody who would use this without the ability, for whatever reason, to actually tell if it's correct or not, again, if it's an artistic perspective and they can do whatever they want, why not? But if they have to use it and they can't tell if it's correct or not, that's, to me, that's scary. That's worrisome.
Fabian, I see. So yes, but just really briefly, I don't think LLMs should ever be used to get facts. That isn't what they're for, and that's what's annoying about Google search results now having LLM stuff on top. They should be used for analysis based on using the word analysis in a broad sense. Anyway, Dini, please, sorry.
I'm just looking at the response to the question I posed, right?
Yeah.
First perspective on the future of text, importance of metadata and structure, concerns about accessibility, ownership, and control. Next one, need for new tools and interfaces, and finally, text is a reflection of humanity. I guess what I'd like to know also is how does it define text based on these premises? What is the definition of text from what it's coming, what information it's looking at? I mean, these are all good, but what is text? I don't disagree with any of this, actually.
So a quick jumping there on a quick comment is one of the risks also of such tools is you might ask today what the definition of text is, and you might get an answer that you like or don't, doesn't really matter. What matters is that you might get a different answer tomorrow, and not
Yeah.
because the machine or the statistical system improved because it read more things. It's just because there is a degree of randomness to it. And again, I mean, that to me, that's shaky. It's not something, it's like if I have a discussion with you today and tomorrow and you change your perspective, it's exciting and I understand why. If I talk with you and you have a different perspective tomorrow because you throw dice, it like we can't
This is
have
just but this is like a hypertext, Fabienne, and Mark will probably agree with me. When we do a traversal of a work like Michael Joyce's Afternoon Story, one traversal through that work is not the story, right? You have to do multiple, over and over and over again. It's like a Venn diagram. And by the time you go through and do that multiple paths the way through that work, then you get a sense of what that story is. But one read through doesn't do it. And so this to me is very similar. Ask the question today, ask the question in 15 minutes, ask the question tomorrow, ask the question in a week, and start to kind of pull the information together and comb through it and pull out the salient points. I mean, I would be interested in knowing the bigger question is, how does this tool begin to aggregate information to arrive at an answer as important as what text is, and what that means for the way in which we think about knowledge and textual experiences, right? So that's what I'm getting at. There's no finite answer to any damn thing we ask. Anyway, the notion of truth is always this kind of, there's a little fluidity to the truth. I mean, one example that I was taught in 7th grade in a class, in a math class, was if somebody walks in your house and holds a gun to your husband's head, would you shoot him, right? Would you kill that person? Thou shalt not kill, but would you kill that person if they're going to kill your family?
I would.
The 10 Commandments say we shouldn't kill, but in that context, would you kill him?
The 10 Commandments say a lot of funny stuff.
Well, I'm just saying that but there are people who believe in this core notion of truth, and while there are some underpinnings for truthiness, there are contexts, and so this is all I'm trying to get to here.
So
Not being stupid by asking this question. That's all I'm trying to say.
Well, I think this is really, really fun. I haven't had this much fun in our community in a while, and I've had a lot of fun lately. So that's a compliment rather than a thing. The difference right now between you, Fabienne, and Dini is amazing. It's the whole point of the community, because you're both right? And the different ways you're looking at it. Dini, using the hypertextual notion of traversal is so important for this, because I also find the notion of truth to be really childish. Very few things are true, and that's all there is about them. There is the context. And Fabienne has already said interaction here, and of course we agree on that. So Dini, you're emphasizing the hypertextual interactions in order to deal with this stuff. Brilliant. By the way, everything you need to know about Fabienne has been posted in the chat, as told to me by Google. Mark.
I want to mention, Frodo, it's interesting, text is more than written words. And this goes back to the, text is a text is a text is a text that Gundar wrote about like 20 years ago, and that Kate Hales cites often. Visual, auditory, tactile code, all these things can be textual elements. And text is process, text is performance, text is interaction. Very interesting perspectives there. But yeah, and I do say there are truths. I mean, I do love my husband. That's just bottom line there. Bam. I love my cat. I love my house. I love my students. I love my program. And there are truths.
There are truths, but they're just not very interesting. The fact that you love John is not just a simple yes or no. You absolutely do. And I've seen it. It's insanely beautiful. there are more layers to it than that. So I'm not saying that the world is entirely subjective, and I'm not saying that. I'm actually saying that your notion of traversal, even outside of hypertext, is very, very important. It's not just one way to see a thing. Anyway, so you can read about Fabienne here, but then Mark and Fabienne.
Okay, I was just thinking that I didn't think there was necessarily, actually, fun enough, much of a sort of counter between Fabienne's comment and Dini's mentions of traversals, because I haven't had time to read the whole Archive paper, but I have traced back through various articles of people reporting it about the Apple research on AI. The really interesting thing, and it came to mind because you made a comment about, well, the LM should be used for analysis. And in a sense, they're finding is that's what you shouldn't use it for, because what their research is indicating is you only have to make a very small perturbation in, I think, what they like to call the latent space. In other words, the n-dimensional statistical probability map. And the LLM is knocked off course. And what it appears to show, I say appears because I'm not an expert in this field, but it appears to indicate is the fragility of using the statistical distance between word objects or phonemes or whatever you're graphing, the level you're graphing at, in the abstract way, because there's no reasoning. And this is the problem, I think that Fabienne was alluding to, is it's not so much whether it's a ground truth or not. It's that the output from the machine is unstable, and the machine is currently unable to indicate the lack of stability of its output. There's no ill intent here, but the problem it caused, the sort of problem it caused is caused at the machine-human interface, because we tend to interpret what's there, especially if it doesn't have sort of typos or grammar mistakes in it or something, as being essentially authoritative, i.e. you might say a ground truth, when patently we keep seeing that it isn't. Where I think so I would say, rather than analysis, I certainly wouldn't want to trust something to analysis without a human sort of control in the loop. Where I think it is quite useful for, especially with coupled to generative text, is in summarization. Though I do notice apparently I'm credited with the work of your thesis, which is rather interesting.
Fabienne, I'm sorry I took your hand down, but you're going to have to speak anyway, I'm afraid. I think this discussion is related to the beginnings of photography. Does the photograph capture truth, etc., right? There are so many things with new media that are more clear and more fuzzy, more up for discussion. I look forward to many discussions on this, but I think they need to be based around LLMs exist. There are some horrible things with them. Our job primarily, I think, is to find the useful things, because there's a lot of discussion on the horrible side of it. Not at all to ignore them, but to just pretend that...
What do you mean by horrible? That's an odd characterization. I don't quite get.
No, fair enough. And also, I have used that in this room before to great not success, of course. No, what I mean is, if someone were to sit down with any of these things and have a dialogue and get things that are just not correct and act on that in the world, bad things can happen. Either they become more ignorant or they do something onto others. No technology has ever been neutral, particularly LLMs with their latent space shape, what created the latent space, how you did all these, and also the security layers on top, which are censorship to help shape. There are lots of issues, but it is still, in many cases, useful. So I think we need to look at both of those things, but we're not like an AI club or anything. So I just thought it was interesting that finally I can upload all of our books and ask questions and get relatively useful answers without having to read all of it. That's kind of amazing. Dini, and then Fabienne, you had your hand up, right? Anyway, Dini, please, sorry.
Yeah, interesting. As you were talking, a note popped up from the New York Times that Donald Trump's apprentice had been seriously edited so that he would appear to be normal, and that the ranting he does today has existed even back when he was on that show, and they had to really, really tame him for the public. And so now some of those early tapes are starting to leak. And so this speaks to what we talk about in terms of truth and images, truth and video. And I think just to respond to your comment, when photography was first being entered into the common everyday practice, I think people did see it as a way to capture the moment, right? The truth of the moment. And it was used for proof of things. And as we became better at manipulating and the tools got easier to manipulate with Photoshop and then now with AI, all of that is just fallen by the wayside. We can't trust images much anymore at all, unless we took them ourselves and can verify to our own self that this was true, right? This is my grandparent. This was at their 80th birthday. You know, we question everything now. That goes to the idea that we've always had this need to question everything. And it's that shakiness that is really, I think, has untethered us. We've long believed that there were a sense of truths, and we long for truth. I think humans want truth. We want to know we can rely on something, which is why the Bible becomes an important book. For my brothers, my two brothers are very tied to the Bible as their sense of truth. One brother's very Catholic, and the Pope's words mean something to him. My other brother's an evangelical Christian, and those beliefs mean something to him. And we need those things because as human beings, we want to know we're grounded, and the ground is always shifting, and it's hard. It's hard for us to accept those things. So what we're talking about here in terms of LLMs, and Fabian, you are so right about that. It's just that you can't really say, this is it right here. This is the definition of text. The way I always describe things, the way I always talk about things is description as opposed to prescription. So I describe things rather than define them. And that makes more sense. So there is like a pen, there is like a fence. There is a large fence. Things can be inside of it. It's not one point on an axis. So anyway, I think it's an interesting place that we are right now. And this is what's causing us in the US so much strife and tribulation. So I need to get to school. As I mentioned, I've got my chair coming in. He's interim chair. I like him a lot. I want him to stay. So John and I are going to entertain him like crazy. I'm feeding him lamb tonight. I'm pulling out a Bordeaux from the wine cabinet, and we're going to wine and dine him, and hopefully he'll stay around for a while because he's really nice to us, as opposed to mean like the last chair. So yeah, Rhoda.
That sounds good, and I'll see you in an hour and a half. No, I just wanted to mention the
Yeah, we'll
obvious
see you at
thing.
10:30.
Yeah, but just to quickly, the obvious thing, text has been able to lie from the very beginning.
Oh yeah. Oh
So
yeah. I mean, the epics. I mean, there's two versions of Homer's Odyssey that we can access today. We just don't know it. Most of us don't know it. All right, everybody. Hugs. See you later. Thank you.
yeah, bye for now. So Fabian now will talk a little bit about changing the universe and things he's actually done. I just want to reiterate to you guys for clarity to make sure we really agree, and that is our goal at the end of next year is to be able to build a knowledge structure in 3D, and we will have to define what that is. We'll have to define what these things in the knowledge structure can't contain and what they're referred to. And we have to define partly what we talked about in the beginning today, how they link to each other, because you can't have all knowledge in one thing, yet it should feel like you do. And these things should be easily transferable within your own system from, laptop to headset, as Fabian's going to talk about in a second, and to other people should you wish to share them. These are the foundations for starting experimenting in the headset. So I built these mock interfaces you saw today. I'm going to try to make it real soon. That's what I'm doing in 2D. So it'll be amazing to really build seams loose here. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be backing up the team with doing things in Author in conjunction with you guys, doing the 2D side. And in XR, hopefully, once we agree on things, Andrew will build taking these things and also allowing them to go back out so that we can really be like Mickey Mouse in Fantasia. But it has to be something useful. And that's why we're looking at our own project, our own book. And imagine if a few months into next year, we can actually allow a human to put the headset on and author something, even if it's just putting a few things together. Be insane. Right, Fabian, what can you serve up today?
Well, I'll show you, and assuming the demo does actually work relatively well, I'd appreciate also to get a short extract of it for Dini to see at some point, because I'm quite, if I understood some of her needs well about exchanging files and bringing the files protocol devices to the headset, I think it might be useful. But I'll just try to share my screen, because obviously if that doesn't even start to work. So let me know, please, if you can see my screen.
Yes, beautiful.
Thank you. So that's another version of the usual environment. What you might be able to guess here on the left are file names, and they come from a directory which I have opened here. So I'll put them side by side. So you can see Sloan test, rendered PNG, etc. You can, of course, imagine seeing this in the headset and manipulate them as you normally would. What's a little bit special, so first it's running on my machine. It's a little server. I can kill it to show you that then I can't connect to it. You also, Frode had a little preview of it. I send you a file to make sure that it might work one day, not just on my computer, but on other computers, including not Linux ones. So the idea of this little companion is precisely to be able to share files and content with the headset.
Fabian, can I just highlight that I was a bit ignorant and it took me a while. Once Fabian walked me through it, it was actually quite trivial to have a local server with a little app that can serve to my what he's doing. So yeah, even on a Mac, this worked flawlessly.
Yes, I thank you for clarifying this. The idea here, I do it on my device, which is a classic trope of computer science or IT rather, like, oh, it works here, and it will work everywhere. It's a bit harder than this. But there were some solutions I explored, and I thank you for trying it earlier. And I took some of our workflow together in as advice. So now there is a URL, and you just click on it, instead of like typing it back or looking for your IP address and all this. So here it opens that page again. And I hope what then become a bit interesting is, for example, have other unrelated files, little photo I took at home yesterday. And if I copy it here, it appears there. Again, it's appear there, but you imagine if you're on the headset, it appears in the headset, and then you can eventually manipulate it. If you copy a 3D model, it should appear there. I said it is actually there in the middle. Sorry, it's a bit small, but the 3D model is here, the gray one. And I think for this group, what is a bit more interesting, again, if I take a file, so Sloan test, and I copy it there, I say live, and now you have this little post-it note, and if I open it, that's the content you see in it. And today we are the 16th of October 2024, and if I save it, you have the new version there. And I believe also if I modify by here mistake, voila, it updates the content of the new created file in place of where the old content was. And to show you a little bit how the sausage is made, and I think it's interesting because it goes back to some of the discussions we had. So there are server-side events. That's why it's so, I hope, so reactive. Like couple of milliseconds. But I think what's also interesting is basically using MIME types or content types. Namely here, I'm not going to do the same thing if I receive text or a 3D model or an image. So the hope there is that we can give it any kind of content, including HTML, PDF, JSON also, whatever. And based on the type of content, then the solution is going to react differently. Like here, it's HTML. It is also text, but it should render it probably as an image or something more usable. Or the JSON here, maybe it should be a manipulable structure. The point is, if you can get a type and you have some ways to handle types, again, MIME type or content type, it's about the same, then you can act accordingly. And for example, one specific, again, for this group would be text, but you can go further, either HTML or PDF, and then be able to manipulate them again accordingly. Voilà.
Not only is that amazing, it's also extremely de-stressing to see. Andrew, do you have questions or comments beyond your massive smile?
No questions, but it's very impressive. I like it. It's very cool to see a lot of what's been talked about actually done. And even more so, it's like you've taken it beyond what we've talked about, I think, and now introduced some new concepts to think about.
So, just jumping around. So Mark said, "Oh no, please go ahead. I didn't see a hand."
I was just going to say, I mean, I too found that very interesting. I think also what's useful about it is, I think it also sort of slightly lights the way in terms of thinking on the effects. This is sort of throwing some light on what authoring tools are going to have to do. When I say authoring tools, I mean not for the people here, but more generally. In other words, because what we're beginning to see in that sort of demo is the bits moving around that bring it closer to thing. When you think, well, how would I generate stuff that's going to sort of produce all this magic, so that we can clothe it in something that the ordinary person can use. So I think that's very interesting as well. Because I did very much pick up Fomen's point earlier about and I think it's something to hold on to, is the difference of the perspective of those of us who sat quite close to this problem for months, if not years, and the wider person who just has no framework in which to understand these things at first encounter. Thanks.
So, Mark, you earlier said, am I trying to define a new knowledge object thing? And that relates to this very, very much. And the thing is, I don't want to invent anything, because invention is very, very expensive, in terms of making it into the world. So I'm trying to find out, including from Jack Park, what standards exist so we can use them. Absolutely. I also think that we here have the right kind of shared perspective of simplicity. We're not trying to make a knowledge graph that can deal with every situation in the world and have all kinds of special things. That's for specialists, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with what they're doing. So to be looking at the reality of what Fabien just built, to have an expectation that, let's say for the next year, the end users need to install this. Hang on. Hello, Brandel. I have 1 hour and 9 minutes of summary to give you. Actually, guys, it's really good timing for you to come in. Fabien, why don't we do this? I show the few slides that I had, and it leads straight on to what you did, and we repeat. That may be useful for everyone. What do you think?
You mean like the demo would have to work twice in a row?
Nobody needs to repeat anything for me. I'm happy to just
No.
join it. Right, sorry.
It's a useful refocusing. It's not at all a distraction, Brandel. Other than I need to remind you, please find someone for us to see when we're in California. Anyway, okay. So I have had some design problems. Actually, I'm going to talk for literally a minute first. That was a bit distracting. What we talked about a while ago, Brandel, was the notion that when you deal with a graph, you want to have two competing things. You want to be able to hide stuff or link to other graphs. You don't want everything in once, but you want everything accessible. So let's say that up here I have Future Tech Lab members. That can be its own map somewhere else, another document server, whatever it is. But if I have 7 Hypertext, the paper that Mark wrote here, I want that paper to know that the author of that is actually inside here. So that's the competing thing. You can't have everything in one, but at the same time, you want the system to behave as though it can, right? So I did a mock-up thing for author, and it was all a mess. And then I had a realization that maybe what we call defined concepts in author that are on the map can be the entities in these things. So imagine you do a defined concept and you get this dialogue that we have today. This is just a screenshot of author. By the way, references at the bottom was originally a bit academic and a bit boring. Now that thing can be used to include a 3D model. It can be a PDF, can be whatever, which is referred to by this entity, this defined concept. It doesn't have to necessarily carry it. So that's a co-discussion. So imagine now you click on this is a, and instead of just having capability person, blah, blah, there's also a specific one called a map, right? If you choose that, then you have to say which map. So you either type the name of the local document or paste it or drag the document onto it. So now this thing is a node, a defined concept, but it is also a link. The key thing is that in the definition now, if the user wants to, they can choose to paste all the defined concepts that's in this other map here. So that means that when I close this window, if Mark Anderson is listed here under team, that will work. If I select this document, it will point to this. So in other words, all this is a link with a link type. The link type is the metadata of what it links to. There are some downsides with this, such as if I change something in the other document, it does not automatically get updated here, but that's purely a matter of implementation if people want it to, quote unquote. But it's a very simple way to say, I have something else, but this is what it is. Any questions on this? So it's just a notion of every time I mock this up in author to have all our things, I get to a point of, do I hide it or put it somewhere else? And if so, can we see it through? So then Fabien has been playing about.
That's the cue.
He is now going to serve up an important component.
So, just no jokes aside, so far I've never been able to share twice in a row. So I'll try, but let's see.
It just works.
Yeah, let's see. So can you see my screen?
I'm familiar with this struggle. We see the announcement that Fabien Beneteau has started screen sharing.
Classic. So I'll be there in 10 seconds.
Oh, yeah, it's coming back in. Brandel, as a preview, he's basically made a web server app. What he's showing you, I've tested on my Mac as well, so this thing works, and it's really super cool.
Can you see me again?
Yeah, well,
We see you. We don't see an intent to share. Yes.
Can you see?
We see the words.
Yes.
Yeah, it's working. Nice.
So I go in my little prototype folder, the Future of Text Sloan Companion app. And I start it. I get indeed a little web server. I click on it. I'm back to the usual 3D space, which I can also access in part prototype, companion, public. And I already put some images there. So I will copy, for example, one here, new live. And you can see it, not just the file name here, but the content. And so I think I called it new live, and I'll change the text here. Put new content live, and I save it, and you see it updated there. So the content is there, it's not a new file. I'll do one example just here with the image, other image, and you see it there, a 3D model, other, and you see it somewhere maybe. So the other time it was a bit small. Yeah, you see it down there. And to show a little bit how it was done, if I go back, it's basically the behavior is inferred from the content type. So here text, what I had in mind, but I haven't done, is rendering, for example, PDF or HTML to PNG, and then using the image as content type. But eventually, basically, the idea is that based on the content type, you have different way to interact and render the different kind of content. And you have this little companion that you install wherever you want. Like Frode said, he had a Mac version. I didn't try Windows version, but I assume it's the same. And I have the Linux version there of a little companion in order to alleviate some of the challenges we have to say, like, oh, how do we store the files? Where do we share them? How do we keep it updated? And it's all on the local network. Voilà.
That's really cool. So that view you had was one view of that content. Is it canonical in terms of like where it is or the sort of different aspects of how it's presented, or can you have different kind of constraints or directives about what a view sort of entails, a view specs kind of thing of what this view is for, that can kind of configure and prioritize things?
Yes, it's not canonical. You could, each viewer could, for example, I haven't done that, but once you have them set in space, when you have them loaded first, you have basically a random-ish position. So that it's not like right in your face, but close enough that you can grab and manipulate it. And then the next step is indeed to be able to save it, and eventually that the layout itself can be shared. I imagine that if you give a content type to the layout itself, let's say it's the JSON file, but you add a specific content type or a header, whatever you want, then that would directly apply the layout. Like the whole point is that the content type will give the behavior. So you can imagine that once you share the layout as a file, let's say JSON, then it would apply there. But right now it's up to the user, but it's not saved yet. Like that's why when I refresh the page, it's basically everything is.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's cool though. That's really, really nice to have it sort of updated out of, sort of pulled from an out of process a set of actions in order to make sure that that coordination works.
Another quick thing also I did not have time to do, but I was hoping to. It's also, as Andrew mentioned a bit before, one of the challenges once you have a couple of different demos, once you combine them together, well, sometimes things break. But one of the hope I have is the last demo was about holding, thanks to networking, like an arrow in order to show, oh, I'm interested in this, and somebody who is not in XOR would see it, and somebody who is in XOR would see, and the other way around. Especially for demo, when you want to show people and you can't describe like, oh, what's an arrow, what's a file, whatever. So here the idea is to combine both. I mean, you have somebody who is on desktop sharing the file or whatever, somebody who on the headset, and you move the arrow in place, or you see the content for the file there. So it's not in yet, but it's the logical continuation to combine those two demos together.
It's a very quick one because I see Brandon has his hand up. For Fabien, am I right in thinking that I'm not going to ask you to try and do it now, but the Canvas JSON objects that we were talking about sort of a week ago or something could be one of the MIME type objects that you're passing around in that sort of framework you've just showed?
Yes, and it's one of the file in that directory. It's not yet there, but yeah, that's one of the hope. And when Brendel asked earlier if it was canonical or not, one of the way to save the potential ViewSpec equivalent for one specific user could be in that format. And thus, if you load that format, it would apply this for that user.
That's really cool. So one of the things, Frodo, when you first was talking about the maintenance of this sort of the dual roles of a graph of pieces of information, it made me think of view specs and what ultimately is view specs. I didn't initially realize that I was just on that old beating that old drum again. But I've been doing quite a lot of work in Blender recently. And Blender is actually incredibly successful at a view specsy kind of thing. And in fact, all 3D apps, well, Blender and Maya, which is all of them. There are other ones, but they're toys. That's incredibly inflammatory. But by the way, sorry, it's a joke for myself, my own benefit. Uh, Blender and Maya, at least, and many others have a very, very heavily biased view. They have a series of biased views towards specific priorities and their names. So in Blender, just pull it up, we have setups for modeling, rendering, UV editing, texture painting, shading, and they're not a little different. They're wildly different in terms of what they are there to do and what you actually end up seeing while you're in there. And so the more I do, the more I accept them as my savior in terms of being able to kind of work specifically on what's called the UV, the texture maps that exist on a model, or to be able to see the animation curves of something like that. So it's really interesting to realize that there's such a mundane, like those people do not care about Doug Engelbart. Those people that are not steeped in the deep intellectual history of what these things might be able to be. But nevertheless, they've come up with this thing that is view specs. And it makes me really yearn for that in other informational contexts where one of the greatest sort of benefits, I was talking to an author, a published author I sort of mentioned on Monday, about the fact that she had all of this junk like scattered around her, very carefully arranged around her studio in order to be able to make sense of all of the different chapters and stuff. I said, what if you could, store that and pull it back out again? And one of the most important parts of what a computer can do for you is the automation of the rearrangement of that, or the reconciliation of this arrangement against that. And so many of our tools are just incredibly soft at doing that in terms of being able to set up a different view. You can look at a Photoshop document even in a number of ways, but you actually have to set up those views yourself. There's no way of being able to say, I want to have this window have these layers on and those layers off. I want to have this one zoomed in right up on this corner of it because I really need to think about how the mise en scène is affecting the way that I understand the cute girl with a bazooka in the corner. So like we have some things that we can draw on. They're not necessarily where we would necessarily expect in terms of references and relevant kind of points to draw from, but that coordination. So definitely like adding maps, adding relationships, absolutely critical. But the maintenance of multiple views and being able to blow away the idea that something is canonical, or at least that there's only one canonical view. Like Blender does have a rendering view and does have an editing view and does have a UV view. And they're not canonical in that they are all sort of configured out of the same soup of checkboxes and configurations, but being able to kind of take a stab at what a hard prioritization toward one particular way of reading a document or sort of enclosure of over a set of claims or facts, I think would be really instructive as a first thing. Like, how different can you get these views to be, and what is the result of being able to have, for example, two of them up and be able to see when I do this in syllogism view, what happens to rhetorical view. Like I think that would be a really fun exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as you were entering, Randall, we were talking about Mark's question of are we trying to make new knowledge object specifications, or are we trying to use what exists? Jack Park will hopefully come and talk to us soon about his perspective and experience with knowledge mapping and so on. But the kind of views you're talking about, they are of course crucial. I think right now we're at the stage of getting the infrastructure so that we can create stuff, move it from 2D to 3D, move it again, move it back, share it. And while doing that, figure out what kind of amazing views we can have. So yeah, I think we're on the right page. By the way, I just uploaded a screenshot from the macOS App Store. It's so cool. Apps and games we love right now. Do you recognize one of them? So awesome. Nice to have a little bit of success every once in a while. Anyway, yeah, and it is relevant to us because, Author is available, and I am trying to change as much as possible. We do have JSON Canvas export now that exists. It's not useful, but it is a step towards integrating. So to have Fabien's server on the desktop and to be able to give that stuff onto Andrew World, wow. Yeah. Okay, we have quite a bit of time left, but I would like to repeat the question that I ask every once in a while. Okay, Mark, go ahead before I repeat the question.
I have a question actually from Brandel, which is that sort of following up from your comment about the fact that ViewSpecs is really where this is situated. Is that is how we might go about if we think ViewSpecs are a good thing, which we probably do here, or something to do more of. The sort of human end education. One of the things I've observed working for several decades with a tool that has ViewSpecs, although they're not called that, but one of the hardest things to get people to do, very bright people to do, is to just relax into the understanding that yes, they are different views of the same thing. So there's an interesting sort of challenge here. I suspect it goes back, certainly when you're dealing with things that are textually based, to the idea that our starting assumption is that underneath it all, there's sort of like a white rectangle with some letters on it. Because that's a starting thing. Now, obviously, in sort of like a design tool, that's slightly different, that your starting thing is. But I think the same sort of challenge is there. And the reason I raise this is how we feed that into what we're thinking about in terms of things like the data object. So what have you got to have at the start point? What's your minimum transition pivot information you need to get from, so it's one view spec to another whilst you're dereferencing further information, because you don't want to be passing everything around probably fully furnished, because then you're just going to be passing around probably more stuff than you want, is my gut feeling, and I'm happy you're wrong on that.
Yeah, I totally take your point. And a number of times when I've introduced what is functionally view specs, honestly, before I even knew the term myself, back in like the early 2000s and things to people, they just, and I did, they found the entire project wildly off balancing, just wildly confusing. Like, why would I do that? But I mean, just thinking about it, a typical book these days actually is view specs as well. If you think about the table of contents, the book, and the index, then that's a recapitulation of the same content in three ways. And it would be insane to have a table of contents for a different book. So in that sense, we do have precedents. It's just that in a book they are three things that are fixed in terms of their relationship. And so I mean, maybe being able to kind of break the ice by identifying sort of additionally, like sort of additional steps along the way from the fixed view specs of the triumvirate that exist as commonplace within a book these days, through to what we do in other applications, because people do have them in some other document systems and things. The fact that email has a way of previewing, or thread views, things like that. I don't know. I mean, the other thing about view specs that is bad today is that, especially in something like a Photoshop, but even in Blender, which has these better, The view transitions aren't respected, as well as sort of meaningful document transitions, sort of alterations, and so that means it's wildly off-putting for very good reason. It means that it went away, like that old chestnut. And so collectively we do have to do a more responsible job as custodians of the idea of view specs to make sure that they are a safe modality for people to work in without utterly destabilizing their work. I was modifying a camera. Hopefully, I'll be able to show you guys one day what it is, because it's just beautiful. But the camera's fine. But the page that it works in is I'm shocked. But I lost the ability to see the edges of the texture map boundaries in my window, and I closed and reopened Blender, and they were still gone, and I nearly had to throw my Mac out the window because of how terrifying it was that this piece of information that I absolutely rely on seemed to have gone permanently away. So yeah, that's a big one, and yeah, so I don't know what people need to know about in order to make sure that it can prioritize tools that don't freak people out. I think there's a bit of education, but there's also a bit of due diligence on the part of people who are providing it.
So I'm quite excited by the new Macintosh coming out, the M4. And don't worry, Randall, I don't have any inside sources, and I'm not asking you either.
I
all
literally do not have any idea about this thing. Like
no.
it's exciting. I don't like when I was talking about Vision Pro, I was lying, but I don't know anything about that.
No, of course, but we all know that, numbers follow each other. So after M3, there will be an M4. So, and we also know there's an M4 in the iPad. So, all these things are very, very exciting. And I'm sure you guys also share that kind of excitement in different platforms. But, the M4 basic operations is 36 trillion operations a second. Right? And that's really, really important to consider because, as I think I mentioned, if you do one calculation a second, it will take you a million years to do the same amount of calculations that machine can do in a second. Right? So these are mind-boggling things. So yes, we talk about views and view specs and all of this stuff, but we are working on absolutely insane supercomputers on all platforms. So I think at this point we can expect a lot. And Brandon, one of the things that I've really taken away from what you've been saying is, why are we afraid of wasting pixels? We shouldn't be. We should not be afraid of wasting compute cycles. We should not be afraid of wasting pixels. So the M5, yes, of course, I'm not wasting another year. Anyway, it's just, I think it's really, really exciting. What was this? No, okay, so to answer Mark's thing here, in Author, the map and the text have absolutely nothing to do with each other whatsoever. They are packaged inside the Author document. The point of it is, if you double click on a node in the map, it will do a find operation of the text in the document. So you can very easily do that. I mean, it's just a really important point to clarify for everyone else, because I know you know these things. So it is possible, for instance, in my journal document, I may have defined concepts that are not in the document at all, because I've just defined them, right?
Well, here's the thing, they're just not in the linear text. And I think that what Brandel sort of nudged my head into is when he made the analogy of, so you've got a book, it's got a table of contents at the front and index at the back. Especially the index might not seem necessarily particularly relevant to the text. Okay, it has words in it, but it's a rather different thing. But it's a view spec of the same information. So the fact that your overall document, your author document, may have information that only exists in a map, but not in the long form text. If you think of them as view specs, then the tension between those different things living in the same box go away. The data, be it text, spatial layout, whatever, is all just part of the document. The view spec that you choose shows you the representation that you need. So actually it ties together quite neatly.
I don't mind that. That's totally fine. Complementary to how I look at it, not an opposition. So I think we should, as soon as possible, start to define what should be in these entities. So also we need to agree on a common language because we change terms a lot. I know I do. So when we look at this space of knowledge objects, what should we call them? I actually like the term knowledge object, or should we call them entities or nodes or?
Well, I mean, so HTML calls them entities and nodes. RealityKit and Unity, and in fact, just about everything else that sort of lives in that world calls them entities. There's this idea of an entity. Actually, yeah, entity component system is the term of art that is used to describe them. So those are in place. They mean their own things, but those are words that people use to mean very related concepts. So all three, unfortunately, element, entity, node, object. Sometimes people even use model. So that's fun.
I'm just writing this down.
I have a thought on that. I mean, because when you said just now knowledge entity, I think that's fine, but of course that's quite closely sort of typed. If you're if you're not doing a knowledge task, then what's a knowledge entity thing? So, and another aspect of the labeling is at what level are we talking about it? If you're talking almost at the data interchange level, then as long as you have a consistent word and things like entities or nodes and edges and things sort of make sense because they've been around for a long time, and you get a rough idea for free in a way as to what's going on there. Now that may not be a word that you'd use on the public surface of a general application to be used by the general person, because that won't mean anything to them. And you might, but then again, the label there might be generated pertinent to the task at hand. So they don't necessarily need to know. The data structures need to know, because they need to be able to navigate around. And as I sort of alluded to in a post just back, so that one of the things you sort of need to know is what stuff can I expect? What am I going to go and have to? Oh, and if you want me to be one of these, well, I'm then going to have to look over there for the extra stuff, and that's fine. And this is technology we know how to do. But so the core objects that you want to sort of name or define as much as name, because they are the core building blocks of the knowledge space. Basically is it seems to me whether they're entities or objects or doesn't probably matter too much. It's a matter of thinking how well it aligns, because Brendel makes the point well, look around the sort of current art. So we certainly don't want to choose something that's going to go off a complete tangent to other things, because if nothing else, that forms another religious war that we don't need.
So we need to look at it from the consumer user perspective, I think, and it needs to be how you would use it in a sentence. So, Andrew's working over there with all kinds of things, and Peter's over there working with all kinds of things. When one of them says to the other, "Oh, can I give you these?" Or can you send me those? Those what? Probably we'll just use the word those, to be honest, right? But because the problem with XR, by the way, is nobody outside of XR development talks about it. They talk about headsets. Of course, we think of projections and all kinds of things in the future, but in reality, people don't buy an XR device or a VR device or an AR device. They buy the Apple Vision Pro or that other one, whatever it's called, right? So it's the same thing here, but we have to have some kind of a name. So when we present this work, we have things and we have a way to know how they connect. Those are the two main things, right? Are they entities and structures? Entities is a bit dry though, no?
But again, that's not the term necessarily the user. The user may well say, "I want to give you these things," because in the context they're working in, thing makes perfect sense. I have this thing, I'm holding it, I've selected it, I'm going to give you this thing. Do I have to give it a name? Not necessarily. Under the hood we want to do, because we need to have more rigor. So the closer you get to the sort of, the binary ones and zeros of the whole thing, then there has to, the naming has to be consistent. I don't think the name has to be visible from top to bottom. In other words,
it needs to be in the user guide. It needs to be in the user guide and the walkthrough and the descriptions.
Yeah, but but that's some way from where we are at the moment. I mean,
It's
look
going
at
to color
the
how we
challenges we're
decide to
having.
design it. The way we name it will flavor how we design it. And we may choose to wait. I agree with that, but
I just think it's probably I think it's probably early in the sense that I'm not sure that the underpinnings are quite solid enough that we won't just go into a loop of unintentional do-overs.
some of the foundations underpinning are not solid. They're completely solid. A lot of this works in Author now. And now that Apple has given me prominence, there's quite a few thousand people using it. Currently, we have a map and we have defined concepts. That is the language I use in Author. I don't think that's particularly brilliant or broad. So if that's going to relate to what we're going to introduce people to in Andrew's work, it's good that we have some kind of consistency, which we may even change.
Yeah. So if we're still on what do you want to name the band? Another sort of component of that I would think is relevant is not just what the things are, but what the set of things is. So, having an entity payload or an entity graph or an entity collection or an entity cluster or a fact cluster. One of the things that you may want to be able to characterize is the fact that is it headless or POD, plain old data, insofar as it doesn't have an implied visual representation. So you could call it a blind cluster. Like there are all kinds of connotative things that you could pull it into, and there are good reasons for it. I don't want to denigrate that intuition because like I said, I think it is relevant. Yeah, I mean, I only want to sort of jokingly denigrate it. Sorry about that. But the so like it also depends on sort of the connotative implications of what you want it to do. Like, are you going to try to say this is unopinionated about its own representation? Because that is a different job to this is a collection of stuff, and I think like getting into some of those details is a useful thing too.
So I'm old enough to have been very, very excited to be working QuickTime 320 by 240. Sometimes we got it up to 15 frames a second. And to me, it was clear that computers get faster, it's going to get amazing. I now currently work with 6.5K at 60 frames a second, right? So I do expect this. I mean, it is really weird. I'm sure you have exactly the same feeling. The Apple Vision Pro, it's both science fiction and a relic. Very soon, it will be seen as being so old-fashioned, we'll laugh at it. This big, heavy, flappy thing on our faces, right? So I am really talking about the day where the headset is irrelevant. You've done something in your room, put things in a spot, and you want to be able to move it somewhere else and view it in a different location and share it. It really is that basic, and that's why the notion we had, just to repeat, last week with I think it was Chris Rutledge who introduced. Think of it as icons on the desktop. Everybody should be able to move what they show. But if you don't have the right kind of special software, you can't necessarily open these pieces because we don't want to stop innovation. If people want to do super special things like Photoshop and XR, fine, do it. But it has to be our goal that we, with Sloan behind us, help to define the dialogue for sharing bits of knowledge and how they relate.
Mhm. So your description of that reminded me of sort of the strongest zealots for the universal scene description, and they call things defs and prims. So we can add that to the pile.
Great.
I don't know. I don't like prim. I don't know. Something about it just rubs me the wrong way. But they use it like there's no possible downside, and that's fun.
Fabian, you, but I have to respond to Andrew. Oh, Andrew! I thought it was Mark being so. Ha! No. So Andrew here, actually, if you don't mind speaking it, please.
Sure. I mean, it's not some deep thought. I was just um, speculating how a lot of times what we think the future is, and like, oh, of course, technology is going this way, doesn't. Having headsets be like a relic and everything is virtual, um, kind of sounds a bit like the flying car future that everyone thought was going to exist, like a decade or two ago, and still isn't here. Sometimes technological progress doesn't push in the direction that we expect, even though it does continue to get better at all times. So I don't know.
Oh,
It's not to refute any of your points. It was just a what if.
I take that point 100%. And when we're talking about the actual hardware, for the next 5, 10 years, you will have something on your face. You will notice it, I think. All I'm saying is that right now it's a bit relevant in terms of it's a little bit heavy. It's extremely expensive, at least some of them are. So I'm just saying, let's just think of a fantasy world where, yes, it's there, but it's kind of irrelevant. Because what I am suffering under stress-wise, I'm sure some of you share it, since the 70s, okay, maybe 1984, there has been no real innovation in interactions at all, in knowledge. Basically, everything goes back to Doug and the Macintosh, right? Of course, we can argue details, but we're talking about these machines with 35 trillion operations a second. You know, we have massive displays. It's absolutely insane. So all I'm saying is that clearly the headsets are opening up new vistas quite literally. It is our group's responsibility, I feel, to make sure that it's interchangeable. That's all. I don't want Adobe to own this. I don't want Microsoft to own this. I want them to be able to own the little icons or entities. We should be able to have an incredible Adobe world. Shouldn't stop that if someone wants to use it. Nothing wrong with that. But when it comes to the general, look what I did today, here you go. It will only happen if we manifest it. So that's kind of my fighting talk, which I know we don't disagree on, just perspectives. Fabian, please rescue me.
No, I mean, we're always in between, like all those predictions about the future are always very wrong. I think it's, without wanting to go back to the discussion on LLMs before this, what I want to be cautious or mindful of is when there is a marketing gap and we say, oh, the future will be like this, and anthropomorphization and this kind of things, because I think it's even important to be passionate, and all of us here are pretty passionate about what we're doing. We can also indeed say the future will be like this. If we actually create it this way, if we, build it, happy to do that. But otherwise, it's always in between, like something totally idiotic. Like the flying car is wrong, and yet most of us casually fly planes. So it's actually not so crazy. And there were a lot of changes like electric scooters or electric bikes and all that. So it's in between, like something like totally off and ridiculous, and yet it has taken like a totally different shape. And we're in there somehow, but again, it's not the way we expected. To go back on naming now, I don't know. I think it's hard. I find easier to implement things, and quite often, food, when you ask me like, oh, what about this and that, I'm like, what does it do? Not like what's the name? Like you can say it's a duck, and then it's actually a cow. But if it does everything that a cow does, then it's a cow, regardless if you call it a cat or whatever. So to me, that tends to be the process that once I know what to actually build, then I can name it. So here it's a kind of an awkward dance that we don't really know, and we don't really know how to name it. That being said, I still put my hands up, so I want to make a pragmatic suggestion there. Maybe one of the closest thing we have most of us worked with so far are kind of like mind mapping tool or canvassing tool. So not something like not something to draw in order to draw, like not Inkscape or even Blender or GIMP or whatnot, but something maybe like Excalidraw or I forgot, like Microsoft has a tool where you do like little diagrams and you don't really care about the shape itself, but you care that it's like one thing within another thing. They don't name it thing, but I think it's safer than going something like the, let's say, entity or element that would be too close to the implementation, because then we're kind of stuck like, oh, we use ECS framework and whatnot, and it's also mostly for developers. So I don't think that's really helpful for people that, again, if we talk about tool for thought or trying to use XR to think better, organize, and build, I think we need to, I think that might be a safer path without like reinventing words that nobody knows or ever heard.
So Yeah, I asked Gemini in the Google Notebook thing for a word like this that starts with a D. And it came up with defined concept, which is funny, because that's what I currently use. You're right, we shouldn't go too crazy on the naming. But I do like the fact that it also came up with document. And I think the new generation, they don't think often in documents anymore, do they? Unless they're at work doing a Word document. It's very much
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
on your phone, right?
And that's also why I was initially going to suggest sticking to the super old file system, because like again, you can do so much, but is it still relevant? And do people, including young people, actually know what and want to know what a file system is? Because we have abstractions on top of this, including the cloud and also. And document, just quickly, is tricky because we also have the DOM. Is it the same thing for our community? Is it what we mean by document also?
Yeah, and the DOM is actually a really great one because that's short for document, object, model, and all three of those are super useful words that do all of the jobs. So yeah.
Okay, let me show you something and ask a question. I know it's almost a diversion talking about this stuff now, but you can see this, right? So this is just forget everything that's on top, and I'm going to move the zoom bar. On the bottom here in author today, I have write, map, outline. It might be nice with write, sculpt, outline, like sculpture. And how do I change this instead of define? There, at some point, there will be a user, whether they're in 2D or XR, they will be doing things like this. So
I would call that craft rather than sculpt in the present at the present moment. If you've ever seen things like Infinite Craft or other things like that, then sort of the combinatorial and relations sort of maps with nodes and things like that is like one significant sort of term of art being used to describe that as craft.
I think that term is a bit overused at the moment. If you go to a coffee shop, they will often give you a handcrafted coffee. It's become a thing. But yeah, I see what you're saying. But we do. But we do need to make some realities around this. And of course, the problem with knowledge is that knowledge in and of itself, when abstract, is nothing. Knowledge has to be specific to be something. So I think, Fabian, your latest rant, to say it in a fun way, was, let's be careful and not be overly prescriptive, right?
What is interesting, Fred, and I put a note in the sidebar, is watching when you were showing that lower bar, I thought, this looks very familiar to me, because basically you've got an outline, you've got a couple of view specs, we are getting there. We're getting, so in a tool I know well, and I reference often here, you basically actually start the two canonical views that you start with are the outline, which happens to be the canonical storage form of the document. For that tool, but let's not put too much on that. And basically a spatial hypertext map, an open map, which is akin to your map structure. It's slightly more complicated in its implementation, but it's broadly the same thing. You put things where they need to be, and that's as much as you need to do. You're not giving more structure. What's useful in that is that model goes back to StorySpace, that takes us back to 1984, which was about when that was first worked on, which is quite an interesting date too.
So do we like the term map? I mean, I've been using sculpture and all of that stuff recently. once you have something really cool and you want to show a friend, once we build something together, what? Oh, you're leaving. Hang on, one more minute. Fabian, do you want to show your friends a map or a sculpture or something else? Bye. Okay, see you later.
Take care. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
I know he's not that into the branding side of things, so that's
Well, map does seem to be something I would say that seems to be around and seems to be uncontroversial. I mean, there are quite a lot of things that are quite different things that are maps, but they seem to coexist within that sort of name, that name envelope, without getting into conflict with one another. What it keeps you safely away from is graphs and networks and sort of things that are directed, because definitely in the case of your map, this is not being there isn't there is no one behind the curtain deciding where things are put. Where you put something in your map is where it stays until you move it, and that again is that's a map type view concept I'm very used to working with. And I say that sort of that model has certainly been around. Well, I mean, StorySpace formally came to the public in '87, but it was, they started building it in '84, to the best of my knowledge. So there's a long lineage there, and some exposure. I know it's quite niche, but I mean, I rather than have to give it another name, map does seem to be a reasonably uncontroversial choice.
What do the rest of you think?
It's gonna, because map is so general, it's gonna be hard for it to be as heavily laden with just your meaning because it means a bunch of things. But that's kind of the fate of all of these words. Like as I've been trying to build the HTML model element, I've conscious of how stupid that is. But unless you want to characterize it as a 3D object or a 3D element or whatever, then there's very little other than the 3D that distinguishes it. And it's one day it's not going to be the only one. So I've kind of resigned myself to that. So yeah.
So Jack Park just agreed to come and join us, and Mark Antoine as well, which is great. It seems, yeah, it's awesome. So for next Monday, thank you for the map comment there, Randall. And yeah, we're logging off soon. I just mocked up define entity. That's fine, isn't it? I mean, it's, yeah. I'm just going to also do. Right, okay. Andrew, we have you here. How are you feeling about this whole discussion around potentially the kind of stuff that we're going to be working with in XR World next year?
I mean, so much of it is hypothetical. I have no real opinion on it yet. Interesting for sure. But like until we start talking how that actually looks, I can't really talk much from development.
No, but just in terms of you as a human, so that's fine. Your comment there. Hang on, just pressing the wrong button here to share a thing. Okay, so we have entities on maps. At least that's an okay internal term to use for a while, right?
Yeah, then bear in mind, if we also sort of keep view specs in context, that possibly a sentence within the text of your document is actually an entity, because it might be an object you pass around.
See you later, Andrew.
I don't. I know that seems very edge case, but again, I'm articulating partly to sort of remind myself that doesn't strike me as controversial. It's not the first thing most people will think about, but it doesn't break the notion of the fact that essentially your text and your map are view specs on whatever's in the document or whatever we call the file.
Very good, very good. Looking around and thinking, yeah, I mean, it's exciting to get to get some hard things that some real things we can experience.
Okay, I have to drop now. I'll be late Monday because I'll be providing transport. Hopefully, I'll be back in time to catch the tail end of the meeting, though.
Sounds good, Peter. Look forward to it.
Okay, bye-bye. Have a good rest of the week.
Thank you. You too. Brandel, two things to you. Number one, I'm arriving in California a week before the Future of Text. I'm going up on Friday. Deanie seems to be a bit surprised at the time I'm arriving, so I may have to change it. That was something I wasn't aware of. So if there's anything fun to do in the Bay Area, please do tell. That would be good. Trying to arrange some meetings. And also, did you see the submerged one yet on the headset?
I did, yeah. Yeah, it was interesting. Uh, I see what you mean about the scale stuff. I think I would very much like to see a varifocal display sometime, just to see what kind of implications that it carries for what becomes comfortable to see and view. It was really interesting to see. I mean, Mark, I highly recommended it as well. One of the things that's interesting is that the person is being earnestly experimental. They're really trying to figure out what are the limits of what's acceptable to fudge with regard to scale and position, how to leverage cinematic effects like focus pulling and racking. So, and what are reasonable bounds on which to put camera movement and other things like that. So, just really, really ambitious. So I appreciated that. You know, not all of it is a success, but it's a really earnest attempt based on the level of a professional grade filmmaker is sort of trying these things out and going like, what happens when we do this? And so that's awesome. Um,
But of course,
yeah,
we understand pre-perspective paintings. So I mean, so in a
But
sense,
Mark,
it's looping round, isn't it?
yes,
So
yeah, yeah.
well, what? Because to a certain extent, we're towards the reality end. So our sort of default perception is, well, it should look as if I was there in the room and seeing it. But I'd absolutely take your point. I mean, I think it's very interesting, and it's good that people are thinking about it because. Our minds are quite plastic actually, and as long as you give people something that isn't too scary at first encounter, we cope with an awful lot.
Mark, can you come to campus tomorrow? I can't remember if you're on site.
No, I've got doctor's appointments and stuff here.
Oh,
So
yeah, you mentioned. The thing that surprised me about this, and also with the Super Bowl one, is when you see things presented as real, you expect them to be real. So when you watch a 3D movie on the Apple Vision Pro in a frame, like in the cinema one, it's really nice and you have the depth and you buy it, almost like Punch and Judy. It's okay that they do focus. It's okay that they do scale. It's okay they do a lot of things. But I really feel that the Apple Vision Pro for this kind of stuff is more for theater than movies. When a person is a little smaller, they don't seem far away. They seem like a doll. When someone is really close, it's not like you're right behind them. It's like they're really huge. That was at least my experience. And also, when the whole thing moves, it's not a camera moving, it's not a viewpoint, it's not a view spec, it is the whole damn room. So I completely agree with you, Brandel. It's a great work of art and research. And a lot of it just isn't comfortable, and that's what we have to find out about now.
by the by, I tried Hyperbolica on the. So what was really interesting is, I mean, I didn't get very far. I mean, I enjoyed it, but what I did get was actually feeling quite nauseous after a while, which surprised
Yeah.
me. And I couldn't quite. The interesting thing is, I couldn't quite. I just got to the point where I thought I need to take the headset. I'm actually really feeling quite ill now, and in the sense that and I think it's the headset that's doing it, or the experience that's doing it. What's interesting is that I couldn't draw a line between any particular thing that I was doing
Mhm.
and what had caused that. And I spent years working in sort of boxes that move up and down all the time, so do strange things to your perception of what is up and down. So I imagined I'd be a bit more robust against that. So that's something I shall dig into a bit more.
Yeah, well, if you have the opportunity, if anybody at Southampton has Half-Life Alyx, then that's a really interesting thing. Again, it's a really good video game made by the people who make Half-Life and Valve and all that kind of stuff. So they're very well heeled and well resourced to make something best in class. They actually have a number of locomotion techniques. They went with Blink, and you can slide around in it as well. So if you have the ability to play it and also play it with a decent amount of time in Blink, but play it while you locomote, that's not as bad as Hyperbolica, but it's pretty freaking bad. And so one of the things is just the visual vestibular disconnect. So, even when you're in a box, uh, one of the things, like if you're in like if you don't see the horizon, then you get the vestibular without the ocular. But I think even a Navy, like the worst intentioned Navyman, would probably struggle to be able to give you the sheer scale of the visual without the vestibular. So one of the things that we kind of learn about as we have the ability to sort of pick apart perception is that a lot of these things are really heavily welded together, but also that our perception and our sort of assessment of the quality of it is much more based on these series of piecemeal things. So sick is a very rough heuristic of what is the combination of things and how well are they working together. So, it's likely that if you were able to get a varifocal display, then it's going to make you less sick. But even just the fact that the things move in that sort of nonlinear way, depending on which world you were in on Hypergolica, there's a couple different ones. Yeah, like just the fact that your peripheral expects if something moves like this, then it moves like that there. Like they can probably be pretty rough and ready in terms of little micro tests, and for each one you fail, it just sort of ticks that number of like how sick I am upward, and different people have different sensitivities to different ones.
Yeah, yeah.
That's my working theory.
So I gotta go. This is good. We're making some practical and conceptual progress. I do look forward to the symposium having some cool systems to show. It'll be our book. And I look forward to Monday. See you both on Monday.
Very quickly, Freud, because I did put something, and it probably scrolled past in the chat, but thinking about it, if we're putting the book stuff into our XR space, if possible, if we're able to put the reference material, the references such as we have, effectively in field form rather than as anything rendered, I suspect that will help a lot, because one of the things I took on board was Andrew's sort of feedback that he optimistically said, yeah, I should be able to parse all the bits out of the strings, and it turned out that actually, it's a classic thing, because they've been rendered into something that never expected. I don't know what the correct term, someone will correct me what it is, but it's not a two-way process. It's basically a one-way process, and that's not designed for you to re-extract from. So getting a clean extraction of which are the parts of this thing, and you can sort of do it by eye, with a human eye, and a degree of familiarity with the subject. But with something like a regex or something, no, you just can't, because and you get things like extra bits of punctuation because the ingoing render is insufficiently specified. And so, if you have a title that ends in a question mark, it'll put a full stop after it. Okay, I mean, you can see the causality of that, but if that's what you're given, in the sense of where Andrew's working at the moment, that's difficult. Whereas if we're able to give him, this is the title, this is the publisher, this is the year, whatever, that will probably enable him to make much more for us in the short term, even if in essentially we're slightly faking the data terms in exactly how we store that data.
I will be given basically Word documents, and we will be encoding this into Author, and from there we can export in as BibTeX as well as PDF as well as HTML, and you are a part of that process very much.
Okay, so probably what that says to me is we may actually need to do a manual triage because if someone basically is giving you the finished string, probably a legitimate bit of fakery to do is say, well, in a future world we'd have this in atomic form, but it's too damn hard to do that at the moment, so we'll just fake that.
Yeah, we will have to, because what we're getting as manuscript is whatever people want to do, and it's crazy that references and so on are not knowledge objects. They are just text in most cases. So yeah, we will work on that. Okay, see you later, guys. Thanks for today. Bye for now. Bye.